Good morning, everybody. So we're continuing on in the idea of going to Erkaos. And we discussed that it's a big problem. It's a violation of an asay, Ela Mishpatim Asher Taslim Lefneim. The Nosei Kalim seems to say it runs afoul of Chil Hashem. The Lashon of the Rambam, the Mechaber, is very stark. Kilu Chirei Figidei, blasphemed, Herem Yad B'Toras Moshe Rabbeinu. But then we said that when you have a fellow who's not going to come to Beis Din, we call that Misarev Lavo the Din. You could throw a fence on him. You're not responsible to sit back while your money is being absconded with. You're allowed to go and protect your interests. Now, the Rosh quotes Rav Palti on page 61, and he says, if Ruvain refuses to go, Ruvain has a claim against Shimon, Shimon refuses to go to Beis Din, so you can bring him to a secular court to remove from Shimon what is yours. Now, we're not chas v'shalom saying you could go to secular court to get something that you wouldn't be doing Beis Din, of course not. But I could go to secular court to get me what's mine. That's the Rosh. The Rambam has a similar concept, but the Rambam says like this: if the non-Jews are in charge and your opposing party is a little bit of a strong person, so if he doesn't want to come to court, so what do? No tel rishus mi Beis Din. You get permission from Beis Din, umatzil b'dinei akom, and then you go to secular court. And that's really what we're going to start discussing today. Is there, in fact, a machlokas between the Rosh and the Rambam? What do I mean? Is there a machlokas? They both say you could go to secular court. The Rambam appears to throw in an extra step. No tel rishus mi Beis Din. If you look on page 62, he has those 4 words. You need to take permission from Beis Din. The last line of the Rambam. You need to take permission from Beis Din. The Rosh does not mention any concept of taking rishus mi Beis Din. Yeah. So the Ramah, over here on page 63, this is a tshuva sefer the Ramah wrote. This isn't the Ramah that he wrote. It's the same person, obviously, but he wrote a couple svarim. He wrote Toras Chatas. So he wrote a tshuva sefer Shalos and Tshuvas. And he talks about a fellow who goes to secular court, and he quotes the Torah over here, the last 2 lines, on page 63. He says like this: Da'atur choshe mishpat simin kavav kasav stama da'asr b'lina tilas rishus. The Torah wrote that you stam can't go to a secular court without getting permission from Beis Din. Now this is the Lashon of the Rambam. The Torah's name was Rabbeinu Yaakov. His father's name was Rabbeinu Asher. His father was the Rosh. If you look through the Torah, whenever there's a dispute, he quotes the Rosh. He says, this is what the Rosh said. This is Adoni Avi Rosh. My father, my master, the Rosh. Says the Ramah, over here, he quotes the Rambam, V'ilu lo hayadas harashkein. If he truly felt that the Rosh, his father, argued and believed that you're allowed to go to secular court if the other fellow is refusing to go to Beis Din without getting permission from Beis Din, lo v'shasak mineh, he would have mentioned that. Obviously, he interpreted the Rosh just like the Rambam. There is no machlokas here. Everybody agrees you need to get permission from Beis Din first. And this is further discussed on page 64. There's a Rishon, the Sefer Truma, and then we have an Achron, the Gidulei Truma, that wrote on the Sefer Truma. So, says like this. Let's quickly read the Sefer Trumas. That we say, that the lender cannot take the borrower to secular court, if he's not a strong man, and he's willing to go to a Jewish court and accept whatever they say. Even if he was a strong person. And the lover, the borrower, let's say, did not want to come to Beis Din, says the Sefer Truma, Also, lahavio l'dinei goyim. You cannot bring him to secular court. Elo la'achar seruva based in Shal Yisrael. Only after the based of the Jewish people, he refuses to go to a Jewish court, and the based of Yisrael kosvin adrachta on the chasav, and the Jewish court finds against him and writes a foreclosure note on his property. Now, Lamaisa, imagine you show up to the county with a foreclosure note from the Beis, then it's not going to work. So he says, subsequent to that process, if you need to, you go to a secular court, and they force you to adjudicate what the Jewish court says. So, Aleph, the best way to do it is to get a judgment in a Jewish court, even what we would call today a default judgment, and then let the secular court enforce it, and that's no longer a violation of Lefneim v'lo Lefnei Akum. Aval im haya anas filein. But let's say you have a situation where the opposing litigant is a mafioso, uveistin shel Yisrael misyarim mimenu, and the Jewish court is afraid of him, and they don't even want to write adrachta. Zeh bechlal rishayim. This is someone who's an absolute Russia. The litigant, the opposing litigant, who refuses, who's such a scary fellow that the Beis doesn't even want to write an adrachta. And that's what the Rambam says. Then if he doesn't want to get permission, just get permission to go to court. Don't even bother with the Jewish court saying a default judgment. So he seems to have two categories. The ideal is that the Jewish court renders a judgment and the non-Jewish court enforces it. But if you have someone who's really a strong man and he's not even going to listen to it, the Jewish court's afraid to even begin the process at any level, the word will get out. So then just go directly to a secular court after getting permission from a Jewish court, and now it's what the Rambam writes. Okay. Now the Gidulei Truma quotes the Rosh over here in the beginning of Gimel, and I'm going to 6 lines down from the top on the second column. Nire de Sover Rav Palti, he says, I believe Rav Palti holds the miyad kishem misari v'loreda simo l'din. The minute the opposing litigant says, I'm not going to court, Yachol Avio, you could bring him to a secular court over the Gilulim, Alfa Pishlo and Eschayev Aide Beistin, even if Beistin did not render a judgment against him. V'game in Tzarach Lito Rishus of Beistin, I'll say, he says, you don't have to take permission from Beistin. And he says, that's not in the Sefer Truma Paskins. So, the Gidulei Truma Paskins, like the literal reading of the Rush. Then the minute you have someone who refuses to go to a Jewish court, you don't need to go to a Goyish court and try to get a default judgment with an adrachta. You don't even need to go to a Goyish court and get a heter cost, get reshus from Beis to go to a secular court. Just go directly to a secular court. If bechlal, they're not going to listen, then that's it. Just go to a secular court. How is this codified in Shulchan Aruch? On page 65. Says the Mechaber Siman Kavav Sif Beis, Hosayada Goyim Tekifa. The non-Jewish authorities are in charge. That's the way we live today. Uval Dino Alam, and the opposing litigant is a strong man. And you can't save it in Jewish court. Oh, he goes like the Rambam. Take him to a Jewish court. Claim him. Summon him to a Jewish court. In Lo Ratzalovo, if he refuses to listen, no tel Rishusi Beistin, and you get permission from Beistin. And now you can use a secular court to save your situation. And the Sma says a klar. Look at the Sma and hey where the gray is. Let's say you have a guy who's pushing a mafioso, and he makes a pronouncement. I don't care what the Jewish court says. I'm not going to listen to them. Then he could get permission to go to a secular court. Let the secular court adjudicate the case. The Sma paskins that you need to get heterakos. You need to get heter kos. You can't say, oh, he said he's not going to listen anyway, so why should I bother? You have to get a heter kos. Okay. How is this codified halach l'maisa, page 67? The Minchas Yitzchok over here has a tale. Isha Yisraelis mechalela Shabbos b'farasya. V'gabana mechal Shabbos. You have a woman and her son who publicly, flagrantly desecrate the Shabbos. V'dorim nochras l'aleinu. Not only that, but the kid intermarried. Maybe he didn't intermarry. He lives with a non-Jewish woman. V'ozva is hadira b'chov k'mo $2,000. And she leaves an apartment, and she owes money. V'ha'aguda, the bund, right? That's an old-time word. Kosvula michtav kashel shayim achov. The people that own the apartment building are Jewish. They're Shomer Shabbos. And they write a strong language during, no, you have an obligation. V'lo tzaislam, she couldn't care less. Uvazeh kosav kvodo dieshlo rishus leilech l'dineim. And he's responding to someone who says they have permission to go in front of them. Why? In front of a secular court. Why? Someone who's machal Shabbos publicly is like a mumar for the entire Torah. Even though by a mumar we say, even though he sinned, he's still Jewish. You can't say he's not Jewish. But regarding secular court, he quotes a sefer, the Kesef HaKadoshim, and Achron, Havale Kanachri Mamish, he's Mamish like a guy. So he wants the Taina. Then in such a scenario, you could go directly to secular court. You go directly to secular court.
Years ago, I had a
What?
Years ago, I had a case with somebody.
Yeah.
I went to a for Shaila. Because the guy is married to a guy, you can take secular court. Even though he wanted to go to the president.
Yeah. So he goes through an entire conversation. Is this mutter to do? And it winds up like this. Lamaisa, you have to get permission for Beis Din. However, normally in Beis Din, we send 3 hazmanos, 3 summonses. So they only need to send 1 summons. Or Beis Din could just decide that he's not going to listen anyways, in which case they could just write a heter hakos without giving a summons. But l'maisa, you need to get a heter hakos. But he says a heter hakos does not need the process of a summons. That's the Minchas Yitzchak. Rav Moshe Sternbach, who's a contemporary, right? He's the Av Beis Din, Rosh Av Beis Din of the Eidach Haredis. He holds differently on page 68. Yeah. So what's the story? The claimant, who is a frum Jew, says, what's the purpose of calling someone, this fellow, who's not from Bechal, he doesn't even recognize Jewish courts. He just wants to go to secular court through a lawyer. And he brings the Kesef HaKadosh and the Minchas Yitzchak quotes. But then he says an interesting thing. If you look 5 lines down from, on the left-hand column where the gray is, 5 lines down from the paragraph that begins Manira on page 68. Why do we first summon you to a Jewish court, Bechlal, when we know you're not going to listen? You're allowed to protect yourself. As the Rosh said, Lahatzil, Eshalo. It's to give kavod to Din Torah. Kishemaro shakacha yamayid. If you're just showing, this is what I want more. And therefore, afilu kshakore chavshi l'din arkos, even when you're summoning someone who threw off the yoke of mitzvos to secular court, you should say that the only reason you're doing it is because he's not going to come to a Jewish court. And then you go to a secular court. So, because of this idea of kavod of the Jewish court first, even though you know he's not going to come, maybe you should go through that process. Then if you go to the first paragraph on page 69, where 4 lines down from the top at the end of the line, mikol makom, nira dehacha shanitzvah b'chal Shabbos farasi. Here the defendant is blatantly Mechal Shabbos. V'gamenutak mechaya hadas. He is detached from any type of religious behavior. So then it flips to not being a covered Beis Din. You're dragging Beis Din around for no reason to warn him. He's warned to follow religion. He doesn't follow it. And all the more so, he's not going to go to a Jewish court. And that's where the Kesef HaKadoshim is correct. It's clear he's not going to come. So why are you going first to get Rishus, as the Rambam says, because of covered Beis Din? There's no covered Beis Din here. You're dragging Beis Din a cup for no reason. The best thing you could do is to go to secular courts.
This is what era?
Now.
So modern day Israel?
Modern day Israel, yeah.
So the Beis Din has no, I guess they have no power over financial disputes?
They do.
Right, but both sides have to agree.
You have to go. Certain things they have power, I think,
from the state, like religious matters.
Like religious matters,
right.
Correct. Right.
Then you have no choice.
Correct. Now, I do believe that once you go for financial disputes, it's not just like an arbitration, it's actually binding in Eretz Yisrael. Right. It's not like it works here. However, he points out something else. They don't put the gray there, but let's just speak it outside. That even so, if it's something that's not due to you through Jewish court, you can't go get it through secular court. Even if the person is a Mechal Shabbos for Hesya. That's Gezel Gomor, that's absolute thievery. However, he says like this in the last paragraph. First column, page 969. Nirashem lefi din Torah magilo. Let's say there is something that's yours based on how the Torah would adjudicate. Rak shekan b'dinei Yisrael. But in a Jewish court, you will not be able to be victorious because of the threshold of testimony and proofs you need. And maybe only in secular court you'll get the money. And the Mumar agrees to go to secular court. In that case, since he's going to agree to secular court, he's not going to go to a Jewish court. Then there's not Gezel if you extract in secular court where you know to be the truth, even if you wouldn't be able to get it out in Jewish court because you don't have enough proof. Okay, a very interesting concept. Okay, everybody should have a wonderful day. We'll continue on Erev Shabbos.